wild. How does he do that one?
We could spend a whole show on it. No, we can't. Back here with Antoine Walker talking basketball. So the Clippers, the Clippers decided to rest Kawhi and Paul George for the last 2 regular season games against the lowly Rockets and Thunder. They subsequently lost those 2 games, sliding to the 4 seed, where they will now face Dallas and not the Lakers in the first round. So, Antoine, what does it say about the Clippers that they avoided the Lakers?
Obviously, I'm old school. I love the competition part of the game, and I would love for these teams to match up. We didn't get the opportunity to see them play last year in the bubble. But I like this strategy by T. Lue and the Clippers. You avoid a team like the Lakers, a team that could possibly give you a lot of problems. Not saying it's going to be easy playing Dallas, but I would rather play Dallas than the Lakers. And then I may see the Utah Jazz in the second round, a team that I'm probably going to be very confident going against in the second round. So if I'm going to see the Lakers, I'm going to see them in the Western Conference. So I like this strategy. I actually, we tried to do this in Miami. We tried to avoid the Chicago Bulls. Our first year of the year, we won a championship. The Chicago Bulls took us 6 games. And then the second year, was we tried to defend that title, we got swept by the Chicago Bulls. They was a team that just had our number, a team that we never played really well against. Kurt Heinrich really guarded D-Wade really tough, and they just matched up really well with us. So that was a team we tried to avoid. So I understand the strategy right now of the Clippers saying, look, we don't want to play the Lakers right now. They're getting back healthy. If we can avoid them and take a different route, and not saying Dallas is going to be easy or maybe Utah, but it's an easier route than playing the Los Angeles Lakers.
I'm so disappointed in myself. Not in Antoine, not in the Clippers, in myself. Last year, I was America's leading Los Angeles Clippers truth teller. Some even called me an oracle. I said, no, that's too far. But I just saw what others couldn't see. That this was a flawed team, poorly built roster, and that they were being anointed a championship contender, and I didn't even see them as a conference finalist. This year, I had a choice to make early in the season. Am I going to stay riding on that Clippers, anti-Clippers train, or am I going to look at this as a new team with a new coach and a slightly tweaked roster with an open mind? And I decided to take that route. I was like, oh, Kawhi's playing more. I love Ty Lue. Ibaka, when healthy, potentially positive addition. Oh, the Clippers. They're a real contender this year. And no, they're not. And they know they're not. And that's why they did what was one of the most embarrassing, and as a pro athlete, I would have to imagine mortifying 36 hours of basketball I've ever seen. The Houston Rockets had won 5 times in 49 games. And they threw the game against them to make sure, no matter what, they wouldn't play the Lakers in round 1. And if that's not enough, the very next day, they play a Thunder team that had won once since April 1st. They had lost 23 of 24. And they throw that game. And you might say, if they can't play the Lakers in round 1, why do they even care about throwing that game? Because they don't want to play the Lakers in round 2 either. Forget the fact that if you want to go to the finals, you got to beat the Lakers anyway. And strategically, it's dumb. You want to play the Lakers early than late, when Schroeder is just now getting back, when LeBron is just getting back, when AD is getting back. So it's a bad strategy, but it's also an embarrassing one. If you are a team, for instance, and this isn't how it played out, Joy, but if the Knicks could have lost a game to ensure they get the Hawks instead of the Heat, I actually would endorse that, because the Knicks' ceiling this year is the second round of the playoffs. So it's a hugely successful season if they win one round. The Clippers, if they don't make the finals, this first 2 years with Kawhi and Paul George is a massive failure. There is no, we made the Western Conference Finals for the first time in the history of our sorry franchise, hang a banner. No. So the fact that they are trying to game the system to avoid the team they're going to have to play anyway is, to me, it's not good strategy. And it's embarrassing for a team that is supposed to have the king of LA on it and be the best team in the West. Everyone should be trying to avoid you. You should not be trying to avoid other teams. But the Clippers revealed that they think of themselves this year what I thought of them last year, which is paper champions, paper tigers, not real contenders. Otherwise, go beat the Lakers in round one and have an easy path to the finals, Joy.
Well, sometimes you got to be real with yourself, Nick. That's what the Clippers are. While you were the Clippers' truth teller last year, I was a huge sucker. And I don't like to be made to look like a liar. So I have zero expectations for this Clippers team. Prove it to me. And that's, while saying that, I really like Ty Lue and I love Kawhi. But this Clippers organization's got to prove it to me. So I'm all for it. Do whatever you guys got to do, because you have not proven anything to anybody. What could happen, so you're talking about embarrassing, what could happen is that they do this and then they lose to the Mavs and they lose in the second round again. And then it's really jokes on jokes. Yeah. So luck favors the prepared. Do what you got to do. You know, I'm all for strategy, especially if you aren't the big dog. But, you know, for me, it's not terribly surprising because it's the Clippers. And I think the Clippers have everything to prove. So it's not upsetting me because they're not of the class that it would bother me, if that makes sense.
I buy that. But two things that I hate in this world: mimes and half measures. And there was no pantomimes at the game, but there were a number of half measures. So if you want to avoid the Lakers, Nick, and I think this is your idea, you put it on a tweet, then the NBA should let you pick your opponents. If you want to dive into that theory, Nick, I'll toss it up to you. Because the idea that you're going to throw these games and have Ty Lue said, you know, priority's health. We got to go in here healthy. Like, what? Just say it. Say it for real. I don't need a half measure of trying to, like, have this as a cover for health. Just say, you know what? We're scared of the Lakers. Just do it. I actually think it would be liberating to just say it rather than put out your bottom 7 guys and have them get embarrassed. The idea that that's going to be good for team chemistry and sort of the mindset of a champion, I just think it's terrible. I do dig into your theory on how they should pick because I think that would solve the problem. Well, I also think the NBA has a problem on their hand when teams are obviously throwing games, especially Oklahoma City. We got both teams trying to throw a game. It's absurd.
Yeah, I just think the 1 seed should be able to draft its playoff opponent in the first round. And then the 2 seed draft of who's left, the 3 seed and the 4 seed, so on and so forth. And then you would always have teams fighting for seeding. And you would never have a situation where there is a penalty for being the 1 seed. Or for example, if the Warriors somehow beat the Lakers and then the Lakers end up the 8 seed, then the Jazz are like, you got to be bleeping kidding me. This is our reward. We get LeBron and Anthony Davis for round 1 of the playoffs. But here's the other, Antoine. Even if I think it's embarrassing, I understand what the Clippers did Saturday, which was guarantee they couldn't play the Lakers in round 1. I think what they did yesterday is bad strategy, and here's why. If they had just beaten the Thunder, which they almost beat by accident, it was a 2-point game with a minute left, they would have gotten in round 1 Portland. They are 6-0 against Portland since they got Kawhi and Paul George. Portland is drawing dead against them. Because they threw that game against the Thunder to stay on the opposite side entirely of the bracket of the Lakers, now they have the Mavs in round 1. The Mavs took them 6 last year, despite Luka being hurt early in the series, and have beaten them 2 out of 3 times this year. I think that the Mavs actually have a real shot of beating them in round 1, and the Blazers had no shot whatsoever. So not only do I think it's embarrassing for what they're trying to accomplish, I also think it's bad strategy to opt for the Mavs over the Blazers in round 1.
Well, the problem is, Nick, you got to think about it. T. Lue probably had a meeting. With that, when you got 2 guys like Kawhi and Paul George, you will hope he had a meeting with those guys and said, what do you guys want to do? And I'm assuming those guys said, let's not play and let's go a different route. Let's try to go from the 4th seed. And that's the part that's a little disheartening as far as being competitive. And these guys are supposed to have championship pedigree, especially Kawhi Leonard, a guy who's won multiple championships, who's been an MVP of the finals. You would think he would embrace the challenge of going against the Lakers no matter what round it is. But I truly believe that they sat down as a group and decided that they were going to make this decision to go from the 4th seed, and they felt like that's the best way they can get to the finals. And they did what they wanted to probably avoid the NBA champs. It's unfortunate as basketball fans and how much we love the game and how much we love the competition. But this is a different group, Nick. These guys sit out games. This is the most sit out superstars I've ever seen this year. It's been unbelievable to see superstars sit out 10, 15 games. It's actually ridiculous. Every other game, we can't even get a quality game to see if good teams, see if these teams match up well together. So this is going to be a great playoff because we're going to finally get to see the superstars play. But I understand why the Clippers did it, because you feel like you don't match up well against the Lakers, so you try to avoid them. And I think it was a collective group decision. I can't see this T. Lue just making that decision on his own without talking to Kawhi and Paul George.